So 2 months ago, I quit my corporate full-time job and I started my own AI agency. In 8 weeks, it has grown to $40,000 in monthly recurring revenue, and we've collected over $60,000 in total during that time period. So here's a bit of my story. I started in the corporate world. I went to the right schools. I went to the right jobs. My first job was actually at Goldman Sachs. And I remember getting that job at 20 years old and kind of thinking that I had made it. Right? I'd done everything by the book expected of me. And to me, I kind of saw it as the pinnacle, so to say. In a way, now that I had a foot in the door, from there, it kind of felt like the linear journey from there onwards was set. And I remember reflecting after the first week, after starting at Goldman, and, it felt similar. The interesting analogy I like kind of drawing is when you meet your heroes, right? Whether they're celebrities, athletes, journalists, any person that you admire, and then you realize, or they turn out to not exactly be who you thought that they would be, right? That's kind of a similar thing that I had with Goldman. There wasn't anything wrong with the company. The people were great. The intensity pushed me. But ultimately, when I reflected on where that path led, I realized that it wasn't mine. And everything that I had built up or built to get there didn't really excite me anymore. To me, I just felt like there was more. I wasn't satisfied with that journey. And so I kind of went back to the drawing board and looked for different experiences and sought out different experiences. And so over the last 5 to 10 years, how that looked was I spent most of my time actually in the technology world. I joined 2 very early stage startups as employee number 3 and 4 outside of the founders. And we built those companies really from scratch. I led a lot of the growth, sales, and go-to-market motions. And ultimately, we scaled those companies from 0 to 8 figures in revenue within 2 years. And we raised hundreds of millions of dollars off the back of that, right? So it was an incredible journey. And, I guess it showed me how exciting the broader technology world really is. The people are sharp, driven, and full of energy. And ultimately, it was kind of a community that I was pretty happy and excited to be a part of. After that, I spent time on the investment side. So more specifically in venture capital, where, we backed exceptional early stage founders that were building products, ultimately that could redefine the future. And that's where I got a front row seat to everything happening in AI. I became extremely, extremely excited about it. And, luckily I had the chance to try tools like Lovable, Cursor, N8N, Windsurf very, very early. And I guess playing around with those tools kind of lit a spark in me, right? At the same time, I was also thinking about how to build a business with them, right? It kind of went hand in hand. And I stumbled at that time, I remember, upon a few YouTube channels that in a way became the catalyst for ultimately starting my own thing. So I guess, just giving them a shout out, people like Nick Sareev and Greg Eisenberg were huge inspirations for me. And I started building automations and small products myself, taught, from a lot of the content that I watched from them in tools like Lovable and N8N and Cursor and others. And I guess those experiences gave me a sense of what might be possible very early on. To get more use cases and kind of learn faster, what I thought about doing was I reached out to a ton of friends who run businesses. Friends will always be the first ones to give you a chance, right? They'll give you a shot. They'll tell you whether what you're building is actually useful to them in their business. And so I was lucky enough to have 2 of my closest friends who were incredibly supportive, who run businesses. And I messaged them and asked if there was anything in their business that needed automating. And I asked if we could build something that would make their lives easier. And they, surely so had a few ideas. And that in a way became chapter 1. And so I built software and automations for them, fully vibe coded with no technical skills, again, using those platforms I mentioned earlier. And I learned a ton in the process. And again, I don't come from a technical background, but having real use cases gave me a specific reason to build. It gave me a purpose, right? And it gave me extra motivation. And through that, I learned pretty quickly, and the products worked, right? And soon I was making $2,000 to $3,000 in monthly revenue alongside my full-time job. And that's when things kind of got interesting, right? And I started thinking about, what could come next. The funny thing is when you start feeling more excited about what you're building after work than in your day job, follow that feeling, follow that voice. There's something there. Around the same time, I had another realization. I just turned 30 years old, and for some people, entrepreneurship and kind of taking shots on goal comes very early and more naturally. But for me, it didn't. I was fully bought into the corporate ladder for, that first portion of my life and career. But as I got older, staying in that path started to feel riskier than actually taking shots on goal, right? Like even when you get promotions every year, your salary compounds maybe 20 to 30% annually, in a really great scenario. And that's very solid over a long period of time. You can build wealth that way. But you rarely get exponential outcomes, right? You're playing much more of a linear and sort of slow progression game. And if you compare those two paths, you often see that people who took risks had exponential journeys. And obviously there's also much more downside, while those who played it safe, let's say, had a much more slow and steady compounding journey. And in my opinion, the latter is also less fulfilling because you never fully own your outcome. And I didn't realize how meaningful ownership was to me until I actually built something from zero. It becomes a huge part of your life in the best way, and it also gives you a lot of control. When I thought about kind of the life that I want to live, I realized that I want ownership of it. I don't want my boss or someone else to be in control of my life when I'm promoted or when I'm fired. That's out of my control. And so I'd rather be the arbiter of my own choices. And, ultimately to me, it was very important that my inputs directly lead to my outputs, right? That was something that I just naturally didn't get in the corporate world. And as I kept climbing in corporate, that became just clearer and clearer. It was always what's next, what's next, what's next. And then ultimately you realize that there isn't anything truly new or next, right? It's another 10, 20, 30% push, another push, but the same thing kind of over and over. And I realized kind of that the promise that I was sold in corporate, wasn't really what I thought it was. Looking back, I really do wish that I took way more shots on goal earlier, right? Like I think in your 20s and 30s, you have so many shots that you can take and the risk is very minimal. And it almost is riskier not to take them, right? Like take it from me, I spent my first 10 years avoiding those shots and I regret it. The risk is really almost zero. And if I could go back, I would really radically change a lot of that. The great thing, especially nowadays, and why I urge really everyone, I guess, watching this to just try something is with the tools available, the opportunities have become enormous. AI has, in my opinion, really become the great equalizer, especially for people that are not technical like myself. We can now build end-to-end products and automations that at the very least serve as a very solid MVP. And you can land your first clients and validate your idea, right? You can prove that it has merit and scale potential, and you can do that next to your full-time job. And so actually my suggestion is not to quit your full-time job immediately. I know a lot of people say you have to go 0 or 0 to 1 or 0 to 100 when you decide on entrepreneurship. I don't believe that, right? I think use your free time to build. It's easy and cheap to build really anything now. And everyone, I don't care what kind of high-flying job you're in, has pockets of time. And so start building small automations, right? Find ways to apply AI in your day-to-day life and help your friends or family in their businesses. And so just start tinkering, don't overanalyze where everything could go, build your skills. And for me, that all started with N8N. I became proficient thanks to content from creators like Nick and Greg and others that just offered a ton of free value on how to build a ton of automations with a ton of different tools. And obviously that then led to many more opportunities. And so I initially started an AI automation agency more broadly. Eventually though, pivoted into what ended up becoming an AI go-to-market system. And that for me felt much more natural because my background is in growth and sales and go-to-market for startups specifically. And so naturally, it just made a lot more sense to apply that passion and interest and experience in that specific type of vertical or niche. Another thing that was interesting was, as an investor, I saw obviously very exciting AI products being built, right? Like everyone was talking about new models on the text side, the image side, the video side, and all the apps that are being built on top of them. Very few were talking about what business adoption of AI would actually require. And if you look at the data, most AI adoption has actually happened amongst consumers, right? People like you and me who are early adopters, loving ChatGPT and image tools and video tools and everything as such. But business adoption is still very, very small, right? Like it's in the single digits of all businesses that are actually heavily adopting AI. And the reason is, quite logical. Like you cannot expect a business owner to wake up tomorrow excited, right? Sign up for a self-serve AI tool themselves, figure it out alone, and then train their team. Like, organizations do not move like that, right? They're larger, slower, and much more complex than individual consumers. And so it became very clear to me that the transfer of AI into those businesses will be largely human-led, right? It will be a largely services motion. Experts in AI and in specific verticals will bring it into companies. And that's where there's just massive, massive opportunity, value exchange, and money to be made. And I think many people overlook this, right? Because they're so focused on building AI products. But for me, it was obvious that there's a huge opportunity in AI services for business. And it's a way that you could create a service business that ideally now can scale like software and can internally look like a software company and allows you to be highly profitable without needing to raise money from day one, right? And that realization, I guess, sent me down the rabbit hole. I love the idea of an AI agency focused on outbound pipeline generation, lead generation across, sales, go-to-market, and the marketing stack. And that became my niche. However, I didn't know my ICP yet, right? I didn't know the exact industry I wanted to target, the ideal customer or company size. So there's a lot of unknowns still at that part of the journey. I also had already built some automations, right? But in reality, and truthfully said, they weren't anywhere near what I would present now, right? So the way I kind of started everything actually was I started on Upwork. And I had, similar to you maybe, heard a lot of mixed opinions about it, right? It felt like a very commoditized marketplace and channel, very competitive, very focused on kind of low ticket work. Right as I was considering it, I got actually targeted by this guy, Ali, who's the founder of Upmatch.io. And essentially what they do is, they're a service or a product that lets you outsource Upwork applications to them at scale. And so essentially what they do is they apply in volume to relevant projects for whatever you're looking to sell every single day consistently. And what I realized is that consistency is absolutely everything on Upwork, right? Like if you send 10 to 20 personalized messages each single day and Loom videos to relevant jobs daily, you will get business. Or you can outsource it. And in my case, I guess I outsourced it to Ali. And so I tried Upmatch and Upwork, right? And I guess in summary, it was the best decision I made early on. I went from 0 to 5 clients within the span of 4 weeks. That translated to $15,000 to $20,000 in monthly revenue within the first 4 weeks. And that was kind of the first big push, and really everything came from Upwork. And I didn't have an Upwork profile, right? I had 0 reviews. I was a brand new profile as well. The other thing that was very powerful about Upwork was it allowed me to test who I really wanted to work with and who I didn't want to work with, right? So it helped me refine the product and service for my ideal customer profile. And after that first wave, I really identified, who that ICP was for me. And for me, the customers that I can get results for and that I enjoy working with were early stage B2B tech startups with high ACV customers, right? Like that was the perfect fit. And it's also really the world that I come from. From thereafter, from sort of, 15 to 20K onwards in monthly revenue, I started using my own product, right? Automated, outbound at scale, highly targeted and highly relevant. And we took the business from $15,000 to around $30,000 in MRR within 2 additional weeks by reaching the exact prospects that we wanted. Essentially, the journey after that then was actually really about doubling down on content. I guess it's also, the reason that we're here on camera today. But it all started with actually one post on LinkedIn. And one post I made went viral for me, right? I don't have much of a following. I never posted much at all. But that one post got 130,000 impressions and 400 likes. That single post booked me 30 lead calls. Also a lot of close revenue from there as well. And that's when I realized the power of kind of social and community. And, when you look at acquisition channels for scale, the best approach, in my opinion, is really a blend, right? You can use Upwork for early traction, validation, and learning. And then once you know who you want to target, you layer in very precise and targeted outbound at scale on your exact ICP. And then you add content and brand for really that exponential push. And in my opinion, that is the combination you need to scale a modern online business. And so that for us became our core pipeline kind of strategy, right? Content ultimately ties it all together, and it drives awareness and demand. Yeah, I guess, it's been a wild 8 weeks. I've learned a huge amount from scratch. There's so much more to build. It's incredibly fulfilling, of course, and exhausting at the same time, but it's entirely possible. And, I guess I urge you, if you're in kind of golden handcuffs at a corporate job that you do not enjoy, and you know that you can do more, now unshackle yourself, like really. Stop playing the status game. I played that game as well. Being seen as a certain person in corporate became part of my identity. My parents were proud and told their friends, and it's a very old school mentality, and it's hard to break out of that, especially in different generational, in different generations there. The longer you stay, the harder it becomes, right? But it's extremely possible to build something of your own, and it's gotten extremely easy to just validate and test. And, I started from zero, and now it's, making me $40,000 in monthly revenue. It's highly profitable with no funding raised. And until a few days ago, it was still just me, building this, right? I was a one-man team. I built it solo. I could definitely keep going at it alone and scale it myself further. But ultimately now I want to actually build a team around this and really scale it properly and go much bigger and much faster with people around me than just doing it myself. And so I guess if you're considering, your next move, explore AI automation and services, right? It's learnable very quickly with modern no-code to low-code tools. Start tinkering and figure out really two things, I would say. First, identify problems you or people around you face that could be automated. And ultimately just think about your friends, your parents, and their businesses, right? And just kind of explore. And the second, figure out what excites you, right? There's room for countless AI service businesses. Are you energized by design, by sales, by marketing, by finance, by coding, or product? Find a niche where you have some form of passion or excitement or knowledge, and then apply AI to that niche. If you do that, trust me, you'll stick it with it longer and you'll do it better, right? Because if you build automation for its own sake with no specific use case or passion, naturally you will not be as resilient when things get tough, and they will get tough. And so there are endless opportunities to apply AI really to what you love, right? So kind of chase that and follow that. Like I'm 100% sure that whatever your passion is, there's an AI plus that passion version that you can build. And so just start experimenting and building. One idea that kind of stuck with me, recently when I heard it really was that, there are kind of two types of people, right? There are people who take risks, and then there are people who work for people that take risks, right? And you can choose which one you want to be. And we're often told that the corporate path is the safe path. But in all honesty, I think that's quite a fallacy. You're never in charge of your own journey. If the business that you work for hits a rough patch or your boss is in a bad mood, you can be fired, right? I mean, you see it all the time, mass layoffs at, even very prominent kind of companies. And your salary and stability can disappear overnight, and you will have no time to prepare for it. And that safety net of employment really isn't always real, right? And for me, it became obvious that the most stable path is to own something you built and control. There's nothing inherently wrong, I'll say, of course, with the corporate path whatsoever. Most people are employed and many do incredibly well. But if you're hungry, and I guess you're watching this, start testing, right? Like you have very little risk in your 20s and even 30s to just go and try stuff. You can try things and take shots on goal, especially now, and you can do it alongside your job. Build MVPs, test ideas, and get revenue early on through the door. And that ultimately de-risks the leap when you're ready. So look, thanks for tuning in. I hope this was somewhat useful. I guess this is video number 1. Apologies if this is kind of rusty, where this is first ever content creation video that I'm making, but hopefully there's some value here. And, obviously, ideally I will be, sharing a lot more, very much in depth on automation more broadly, but also very specifically on how we built the kind of AI lead, or how I built the lead gen agency, and really kind of giving you all the blueprints and secrets so that if you wanted to, you could start the exact same business, right? And just kind of get started there. So, appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you next time again.